I know a lot of us don't care for Buick anymore. It's been a slow downfall for the company over the last decade or so. Their 2010s run was interesting. I know half the lineup were Opals, but for the most part, they were decent in my eyes. There was just a lot of variety from them 10, 15 years ago. The 2000s had some okay models like the Century, super reliable, but also they had the Rendezvous, which honestly I think is worse than the Aztek. If we go back in time to the 70s, you could argue this was their best decade, the Electra being one of my personal favorites, just absolutely stunning. The thing with Buick is, while their main focus was luxury and sometimes affordability, they always offered cars with decent performance. Well, decent is an understatement for some cars like the GSX and GNX, both of which broke many records. Throughout the 80s, Buick had the T-Type package for a lot other models. There's the Park Avenue Ultra, Supercharged Riviera, W-Body Regal GS, the Opel Regal GS, and these are definitely more well-known. I wanted to dig deep into Buick's history and find some of the lesser-known performance cars they have offered over the years. I was able to come up with 10 different models or trims from Buick, and I have to say, I'm confident that there's at least 3 entries that you've never heard of. I will be going in chronological order. Some entries are a lot better than others, but nevertheless, it's going to be an interesting video. That being said, here are 10 short-lived Buick performance cars you don't remember. To start things off, let's talk about the 1973 and 74 Buick Century Grand Sport Stage 1. This is one of those Buicks that nobody remembers, partly because the company barely promoted it. By the early 70s, muscle cars were basically on life support. Emission rules, safety regulations, high insurance, and gas prices were killing the market. But Buick quietly kept the performance flame alive. The Stage 1 package meant business. Under the hood sat a 455 cubic inch V8 rated at 270 horsepower and 390 pound-feet of torque. And while those net figures sound a lot lower than earlier years, it was still one of the strongest engines you could buy in 1973. Compared to Pontiac's hyped-up SD 455 or even a big block Corvette, Buick was right there with them in output, just without the spotlight. What makes these cars really interesting today is the rarity. In 1973, only 728 Stage 1s were built. Of those, just 92 had a 4-speed manual, and less than 10 are known to survive. The following year, production dropped to just 478 cars. Come 1975, the Century GS entered its third and final year on the Colonnade body, and it now came standard with a V6, or could be optioned with a 175 horsepower 350. So while everyone knows the legendary GSX, this Colonnade era Stage 1 was one of Buick's last true big block muscle machines. It had the power, it had the torque, but thanks to bad timing and almost no PR push, it ended up as one of the most overlooked performance Buicks of all time. Our next entry is, it's pretty lame, so I'll be quick with it. It's the 1974 Buick Apollo GSX. What's the Apollo, you may be asking? This was Buick's Nova, offered from 1973 to 1975. You heard me say GSX, you think performance, but this was just an attempt to capitalize on past glory. Offered in 1974, the GSX package added a sporty grille, which was just black, GSX badging, paint stripes, sport mirrors, white bucket seats, and it was more well equipped inside. You could either have a 6-cylinder or a 350 under the hood. The 350 didn't even come standard. Like I said, pretty lame, but moving forward, the entries only get better from here, I promise. Up next is the 1975 and 76 Buick Century Free Spirit. The whole Free Spirit name was a marketing push to make Buick seem younger and more exciting, and the tie-in with the Indy 500 pace car was supposed to seal the deal. Buick Centuries were the official pace cars in 1975 and 1976, and of course Buick rolled out replica editions for the public. The 1975 Free Spirit was based on the Indy pace car and came in a flashy white exterior with red, white, and blue striping and the Buick Hawk logo splashed across the hood. Inside, you got a matching blue and white interior, bucket seats, and even a floor shifter. Some cars had Hurst hatch T-tops, which was pretty wild for a Buick in '75. It looked the part, but instead of the real pace car's 455 V8, buyers got a 350 V8 with about 165 horsepower. Heavy-duty suspension was included, but performance was still more about appearance than speed. Around 1,800 of these replicas were built. For 1976, Buick downsized the idea. The facelifted Century brought in square headlights and a sharper styling, and the Free Spirit edition leaned into a silver, black, and red color scheme with a black interior. It looked meaner, and Buick even added a rear spoiler to sell the performance vibe. But under the hood, the standard engine was a V6 with 105 horsepower and no turbo like the actual Indy pace car had. Buyers could option a V8, but still, this was deep in the malaise years. The suspension could be upgraded to a heavy-duty rally setup and positive traction differential was available, but you had to pay extra for it. Wow, okay, well, it seems to me we're off to a pretty bad start here. Our next entry is another Century, but this time in the form of a wagon, the 78 to 80 Century Sport Wagon. The Buick Sport Wagon was its own model in the 60s and early 70s, then moved to a trim package for the Century. When I first saw this car, I saw that logo on the front fender, the Buick Hawk, and I thought to myself, that looks familiar, and as it turns out, that's the same logo that was on the Century Turbo Coupe. That's another forgotten Buick performance model, and I actually made a separate video for it if you're interested. This was a $430 option, and from what I could find, you got white wall tires, designer sport wheels, painted mirrors, rear spoiler, and I believe the F41 package. When looking at this photo, we can see that rear sway bar. This package was available on Malibu wagons as well, which were also A-body cars, so it makes me think it came with it. That would mean a larger front sway bar, stiffer springs, quicker steering ratio, and a few more features. Sport wagons were pretty much unheard of. I know there was the Malibu SS wagon, but for the most part, it was up to the buyer if they wanted to spec it out in such a way. Anyway, these could have either a Buick V6 or Pontiac 4.9 V8 mated into a 3-speed automatic transmission. These weren't anything crazy, but they certainly are unique, and it technically meets the criteria for this video. Our next entry is a bit better, it being the 1982 Buick Grand National. The 82 Grand National was created to celebrate Buick's NASCAR dominance, and production was completed by Cars and Concepts. Buick originally planned just 100 cars, but demand pushed the total to 215, making it the second rarest Grand National of them all. As we can see, these aren't black, but rather two-tone charcoal gray and silver with red pinstriping, a rear spoiler, blacked out grille, and special turbine wheels. Inside, you got two-tone Lear Siegler bucket seats with embroidered GN logos, a leather-wrapped steering wheel, T-top, cruise control, air conditioning, power windows, the whole package. Buick wanted this thing to feel special, and with a $3,200 option price, which made it one of the most expensive Buicks offered at the time, it had to. Now, the part that surprises people, under the hood. Most of these cars did not get the 3.8 turbo. Instead, they ran Buick's 4.1 V6, a naturally aspirated engine with just 125 horsepower. That was Buick's answer to the V8s at the time, and this engine ended up being cancelled a few years later, but these did come with the firmer F41 suspension tune. About 10 to 15 cars did sneak out with the turbo V6 from the Regal Sport Coupe, good for 175 horsepower and 275 pound-feet of torque, and these cars are easy to spot thanks to a raised hood bulge. Our next rare performance Buick is the 1984 Buick Southern California Skyhawk, or SCS. I was only able to find this one ad for it. I'm guessing it was a dealer-only sort of deal, kind of like the Malibu M80. You have your average J-body Skyhawk introduced in 82, it being in 84, it's on the older side of this generation. Consumers had the option to have either a 1.8 fuel-injected 4-cylinder in red with a 5-speed, or the 1.8 turbo good for 150 horsepower with a 4-speed automatic. They came with Buick's Level 3 suspension, black grille, sport mirrors and headlamps, aluminum wheels, bucket seats, tachometer, and I believe that's it. It's basically a Skyhawk T-Type, and now that I'm seeing the T-Type ad next to the SCS ad, the wheels look the same, so these also got rack and pinion steering and firmer suspension. Call it what you want. Is this the most exciting entry? Definitely not. Is it the worst? No, but I need to kick it up a notch. Buick decided to dust off the Grand Sport name last used in the 70s and apply it to their front-wheel drive Century Coupe. Only around 1,000 were built, making it far rarer than most people realize. On the outside, every GS came finished in triple black, black paint, blackout trim, black moldings paired with a decklit spoiler, front air dam, and black aero rocker panels. It rode on 15-inch aluminum wheels with GS center caps wrapped in Goodyear GT tires. Inside, it carried over the performance theme. You got two-tone black and gray reclining bucket seats with the embroidered Power 6 logos, a leather-wrapped steering wheel and shift handle, a full console with a shift boot and storage, and even special GS floor mats. Buick made sure you had all the basics too: air conditioning, a full gauge package with a tachometer, and an AM/FM stereo with seek scan cassette and clock. Under the hood sat Buick's familiar 3.8 V6 good for 150 horsepower, paired with a 4-speed overdrive automatic. No turbo here, just a naturally aspirated setup making far less power than the Regal Grand National's 245 horsepower. Buick did give the Century GS a touring suspension package with MacPherson struts and coil springs set up in the front with a twist beam axle in the rear. You also got front disc brakes and a tuned sport exhaust that gave off a deeper growl than your average Century. The catch, the Grand Sport package was not cheap. The GS added about $3,300 to the price of a Century Coupe in 1986, which is almost $10,000 in today's money. I think it would have been nice if these received just a slight power increase over T-top models to be more in the middle of it in the Grand National, especially with that price tag. However, this is still one of my personal favorites in this video, and it definitely tops what we just covered not too long ago. Our next entry is probably our second rarest, and it's the 1986 Buick LeSabre Grand National with only 117 units produced. These were built to qualify the new 86 LeSabre for NASCAR, these new 6 gens on the front-wheel drive H platform. At a quick glance, these look like any other regular LeSabre coupes, except for one key difference: that rear side window. This was the main reason these Grand Nationals were built, as the modified side window gave the body an advantage over a regular LeSabre side window on the track. This wasn't just some trim piece, the louvered windows actually had functionality to them. On top of that, you got Turbo 6 badges on the fenders. Notice how they are red and not the traditional yellow and red. This was to help distinguish between a turbo from a non-turbo version. You also got blacked out trim, although there was still some chrome, aluminum wheels, Goodyear GT tires, FE1 suspension, front spoiler, and dual exhaust outlets. These were rumored to have been turbocharged, but they kept destroying the front-wheel drive transmission, so they have the same 3.8 V6 good for 150 horsepower. This was a $1,200 option. All units were shipped to the Daytona 500, where each was taken on the track for at least one lap and were only sold in Georgia and Florida. While this special edition was just a means to get it past NASCAR's rulebook, I really like them, and I'm sure many of us have never heard of them. Finally getting out of the 80s and into the 90s with the 1996 Buick Regal Grand Sport Coupe. That would mean we are at the very tail end of the third generation Buick Regal, introduced back in 1988. This might be a stretch to some people, but 1996 introduced the Series 2 Buick 3.8, and these made 205 horsepower and 230 pound-feet of torque. The Series 1, offered from 1990 to 95, made 170 horsepower and 220 pound-feet of torque. That's over a 20% increase in power output, and if you pair that with the Grand Sport Coupe, you got yourself a decent little car. These also have the new facelift introduced back in '95, interior was completely redesigned, and it was safer. You also got aluminum wheels, nice interior features, upgraded suspension, fog lights, bumper fascias, lower body cladding, and the wheel arches were slightly squared off. For '96, around 6,000 total Regal coupes were built across 3 different trims, making these quite rare and forgotten about. Probably the most well-known entry in this video, it being the 2008 to 2009 LaCrosse Super. Buick brought back the Super nameplate in 2008 as part of the LaCrosse facelift, which was first introduced back in 2005. Under the hood sat the LS4 5.3 V8, good for 300 horsepower and 323 pound-feet of torque, 0 to 60 in around 5.7 seconds, with a top speed of 150 miles per hour. If you know your GMs well, this was the same engine found in the GXP Impala SS and Monte Carlo SS. To handle all that power, Buick fitted Bilstein struts, larger brakes, Magna-Steer variable effort steering, StabiliTrak, heavier duty transmission, tighter bushings, and stiffer torsion rods. Dual exhaust with polished tips completed the look, and of course you got Buick's trademark venti ports, 18-inch wheels, unique grille inspired by the V-Light concept, subtle side skirts, and a small deck lid spoiler. Less than 2,500 of these were built over its short 2-year production run. Yeah, these are front-wheel drive, and I already know there's going to be some comments about it, but I still think these are great cars. I'm going to finish this video off with a prototype, the 2004 Buick Rainier GNX. When I first saw this, I thought it was super cool, and instead of making a separate video on it, I thought I'd just add it with these other Buicks. Unveiled as a show vehicle, the Rainier GNX was Buick's attempt to bring some performance heat to its mid-2000s SUV lineup. GM took a regular Rainier with the 5.3 V8, bolted on a supercharger, and claimed output of over 600 horsepower. Power went through a 4-speed automatic and an all-wheel drive system, making it sort of a spiritual preview of the Trailblazer SS or 97X Aero. The concept received the full GNX treatment. Gloss black paint, blackout grille, GNX badges, Borla exhaust, 20-inch chrome wheels, and a custom gauge cluster. Inside it had 2-tone black and gray leather, navigation, a DVD system, heated seats, and a GNX specific instrumentation. Originally housed in GM's Heritage Collection, the Rainier GNX was auctioned off during GM's 2009 bankruptcy sell-off. Since it was a prototype with an experimental VIN ending in EX, it can't be legally titled or driven on public roads. It's changed hands at Bear-Jackson more than once, at one point selling for just $19,000, and today it's floated around for sale at prices near $50,000. Before GM's bankruptcy, they were really trying out some different things. It was a fun time. The SSR, HHR-SS, GTO, Ion Redline, XLR, Envoy, XUV, the list goes on. It makes me think that who knows what else they would have released. The Rainier GNX would have been something else, that's for sure. And there you have it, 10 forgotten performance Buicks from over the years. I said at the beginning of the video that I'm confident that at least 3 entries would be a surprise. Did I get that right? Let me know in the comments if I did. Be sure to like the video and subscribe if you're new. This channel focuses on the unusual and sometimes even mundane side of the car industry. Also, you're helping out a real creator, unlike those AI slop channels that like to steal content. Thank you all for reaching into this point of the video. I appreciate all the comments that I get on these videos. This channel means a lot to me, and I can't wait to hit 100,000 subscribers. With that being said, enjoy the rest of your week, unless if you're a Bears fan. I hope you guys lose to Washington, and I will try and see you all next week.